At the beginning of spring 2018, the brand new cruise ship Symphony of the Seas, that became the apogee of shipbuilding and tourism industry, was launched into the sea as a senior liner of the now legendary Oasis family. Let's take a closer look at this miracle. In the mid-2000s, Royal Caribbean International, one of the world's largest operators of the sea cruise travel, decided that their Freedom cruise liners are small and boring. They decided to create a new generation of ships that would be unsurpassed in every possible way. The largest, most capacious, and most luxury. The project was daring, but interesting. A new family of huge liners was developed and called the Oasis class. This step forward was impressive. The new ships were supposed to be almost 9 meters wider and 24 meters longer than their predecessors, and their total internal volume increased almost by a half. The first Oasis-class vessel was in fact Oasis. The liner Oasis of the Seas, with a big ceremony, sailed to the ocean in the late 2009 and showed amazing results. There was simply not a single vessel in the world to compare with it. Royal Caribbean, of course, seeing the success of their offspring, continued the development of the family. A year later, the second liner Allure of the Seas started its first cruise. A few years later, in 2016, tourists began to travel on the Harmony of the Seas, and now, in April 2018, the fourth brother of the family and our today's hero was born, the Symphony of the Seas. The Symphony was built over 3 years at the STX France shipyard in Saint-Nazaire, France. The Harmony of the Seas was built there too, whereas the first two vessels, Oasis and Allure, were assembled at the STX shipyards in Turku, Finland. The construction of those vessels, as you can guess, is very expensive. Answering the journalist's questions about how much such a ship costs, the Royal Caribbean boss Richard Fine joked, "We said thank you in a fairly tangible way. We actually said it 1 billion times, and each one was €1. According to approximate calculations, their gratitude was worth nearly $135 billion. But the ship that STX delivered to the customer for that money was worth it. Symphony of the Seas has a length of 362 meters, which is almost the height of the Empire State Building in New York. If the length of this floating city can be compared to a skyscraper, then its height also to a very high building. At a total height of 72.5 meters, standing on a city street, it would easily shame the nearby 20-story houses. With that in mind, thanks to a big width, only about 9 meters of that total height stay underwater. It's like the liner just slides on the sea surface. The ship is huge and has a displacement of 228,000 gross tons. Is that a lot? 228,000 is almost 5 Titanics, so think for yourself. Of course, this floating city needs energy. Symphony of the Seas power plant is made up of 6 giant diesel generators with power from 90 to almost 26,000 horsepower. And the movement of the ship is performed by 3 huge propellers installed into the special azipods outside the hull of the ship. These devices can rotate, changing the vector of propeller thrust and simplifying control. Also, on the sides of the ship there are a few more small engines. They allow this giant to easily navigate inside the small harbors of numerous coastal towns, where tourists will go out. About tourists. The ship is able to take on board almost 6,700 people, most of them of course travelers. But a high level of service requires a lot of staff, so the crew is about 2,200 people. Approximately the same number of people was on the Titanic in total, but now it's only the crew. Also, such quantities are almost normal on cruise ships nowadays. Now someone will say, okay, he's comparing the ship to the sunken Titanic, not a good sign. Don't worry about it, the ship is packed with a huge amount of security, so it would take a completely incompetent idiot to cause such a disaster. But as Warren Buffett said, you should invest in a business that even a fool can run. If a fool appears and shuts down every self-security systems, there are 18 boats on the ship, each of them accommodating 370 people. Yes, the boats have grown considerably since 1912. Nevertheless, 18 of those are quite capable of taking everyone on board. During the cruise, 5,518 tourists will live in 2,759 rooms. most of which have balconies with a view of the sea or a huge inner walking area. Inside this area, there are about 12,000 various plants. There's a huge number of entertainment venues, playgrounds, shops and restaurants, and somewhere among them, the new Jamie Oliver's restaurant is hidden. There are several bonuses that are already familiar to the guests of the Oasis-class cruise ships. Among them a high-speed internet working all around the ship in the middle of the ocean, as well as a fairly innovative and fashionable solution now, a large bar without bartenders. Instead there are robots that will make any drink, but unfortunately they can't listen to your emotional outpourings over the glass. Or maybe they can, just don't expect any useful advices afterwards. A detailed description of all the ship's recreations wouldn't make sense. Many of them are already standard for cruise liners, and the simple listing of their brands and names can take a whole video. This is everything from coffee houses and children's surf schools to luxury restaurants and Broadway musicals. I can only say that the entertainment program development took almost the same amount of time as finishing the ship itself, and purchases of the food products began 2 months before the first voyage. Spending time on such a miracle would not be cheap, but not crazy expensive too. The cheapest 4-day tours will cost approximately $1,000 per person, and the most expensive 12-day voyage from Barcelona to Florida across the Atlantic will cost about $10,000. But this journey is worth it, especially since the symphony itself is the best of the best. However, if you love to break records, hurry. The Oasis family did not end on the ship, and in a few years we will probably see another liner, which most likely will take away the proud title of the best in this class. What do you think about these ships? Like, write the comments and do not forget to subscribe. Meet you soon!